Hi, we're Quaint and Curious Volumes. My name is James. Today I'm going to bring to you my review response to Time Regained, the sixth or seventh, depending on how you count, volume of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. In Search of Lost Time, a seven volume or six, depending on how you count, series of books that some consider to be count as one novel altogether. I think Proust himself did think of it that way, even though the final three volumes were published after he died and were not given as much attention as he had paid to the preceding four. Uh, Also, my understanding is that his original plan for the novel was that it would be three volumes. The first, Swan's Way; the third, Guermont Way; and uh, the this last one. So it would be Swan's Way, the Guermont Way, and Time Regained. And you can kind of see how that as a scheme sort of makes sense because the Swan's Way, or the way by Swan's house, describes one of the paths that you could take for a walk around his home in the village of Cambrai. The Guermont Way was another of the paths, but they also represent Monsieur Swan and the Guermont family, sort of different ways of approaching life. And members of the Swan family and members of the Guermont family keep weaving in and out of the narrator's life, and in the end, the two families kind of become merged, and so Time Regained sort of ties them together in some interesting ways. And in fact, one of the late volumes, The Fugitive, indicates that perhaps the plan was that they would become even more merged, although that doesn't really happen in this book. Anyway, let's talk about Time Regained. So as we left the end of The Fugitive, I think the latest big news was that Gilbert, daughter of Swan and Odette, was going to be, well, she had inherited Swan's fortune, and her mother, Odette, had married Monsieur de Forcheville, and she did inherited some more money from that, and then she was engaged to marry the narrator's friend, Robert de Saint Loup, who was a member of the Guermont clan. The Guermonts are okay. So in short, the Swans are not aristocrats, but they're sort of wealthy, or rather upper middle class, very sophisticated people. And Swan is an aesthete. He teaches the narrator a lot about books and art and architecture, and inspires the narrator's love for and fascination with, and to an extent his desire to become a writer. Even though throughout the books he occasionally tries his hand at writing and never gets very far. He does publish some articles, but talks a bit about his frustrations in actually writing anything worth reading. So that's Swan, and Swan, as is detailed in the first volume, and this all kind of happens uh, before the narrator is really paying attention to anything. So it's something that he learns about. Swan falls in love with a woman named Odette de Crécy, who is a prostitute, and he becomes very jealous of her, as one might if one was in love with a prostitute, and kind of becomes a bit irrational. These are things that happen over and over to various characters in the course of the book. But he marries her. He has a daughter who becomes Gilbert. Gilbert is the narrator's childhood friend, his first love, and they kind of go their separate ways for a long section of the book, but they become reacquainted in the Fugitive, the second to last, the penultimate volume. So she's married. She becomes married to Robert de Saint Loup, and Robert de Saint Loup, I think he's sort of becomes a major character in Volume Two. He's a cavalry officer and a member of the Guermont family. The Guermonts are an old aristocratic family. They are dukes and duchesses, and they were sort of the local um, uh, aristocracy in Cambrai, the village where the narrator grew up. And of course, they also have a home in the fanciest part of Paris, and are, intimates of royalty and all that. Even though France at this period is a republic, the aristocrats, they have money. They're allowed to use it well. The Guermonts have money. Not all the aristocrats have money. They're allowed to use their titles, but they don't have any other real privileges or powers in the French Republic. There are, they do have dealings with aristocrats from other countries, for English and Italian and German aristocrats who still actually do have some sort of role in the monarchies in those countries. Well, not Italy, it was not a monarchy. Anyway, let's not get off track. Let's keep it to Swann and not to Italian history. Swann and Marcel and Gilbert. So, what's going on here? When Time Regains opens, we have World War One is going on, or it has broken out. It's in any event, it's some years after the end of The Fugitive. So there's a lot of talk about what's going on in Paris during World War One, how it has changed things, and how being married to Robert has changed Gilbert, and how Robert being married to Gilbert has changed. The narrator, of course, has a few more encounters with Baron de Charlus, one of the Guermonts, very eccentric aristocrat, a very snobbish person, but one of the most colorful characters in here. Also, Madame de Verdurin, who is the Verdurins are they're kind of, I guess they're social climbers. They come up throughout this, but she has she's been widowed, so Monsieur de Verdurin has died, and Madame de Verdurin is now the Princess de Guermont. So she is the former Princess de Guermont from earlier volumes has died, and so Madame Verdurin is now the Princess de Guermont. It's interesting because throughout this volume, people take on the names of other characters, so that it takes a little reminding what exactly is going on here, because Gilbert now is married to Saint Loup, and then is widowed because Saint Loup dies in World War One, leading his troops. And during the war, there's a sort of blackout because this is the first war where there are airplanes used. So Paris can be attacked by airplane at night, and there are laws about how you have to cover your windows and turn out the lights and keep it dark so that the planes don't have anything to aim at. And while the narrator, who has been spending some time in a sanatorium for his health, he's always had various ailments. In real life, Proust was an asthmatic who spent a lot of time in bed or in sanatoriums himself. So he's kind of in and out of sanatoriums, although that's never discussed really. He doesn't talk about his life in a sanatorium. There's no Magic Mountain aspect to this. It's always what he's doing when he's not in between stays at the sanatorium. So he comes to Paris, and he's caught in this sort of air raid, and he takes shelter in a building which in a hotel, or seems like a hotel, but it actually turns out to be a brothel being run by a Jupien, who was a tailor who had a relationship with, or a, sort of a brief fling with Baron de Charlus. So Jupien is now running this hotel, which is really a brothel where upper class men can have dalliances with ruffians. So Jupien goes and he hires his soldiers on leave and such to be the to prostitute themselves for people like Baron de Charlus. What a surprise! Baron de Charlus, the narrator kind of stumbles upon him in a room being whipped by a soldier, who's like, verbally abusing him as well. And there's all this weird stuff of Jupien coaching these soldiers that he's hired to play ruffians, and one of them is it's he's trying out some of his material on Charlize after the whipping is over, and he's like, I'm such a pervert. I watched my parents having sex, and he's expecting this to be really impressive to Charlize, and Charlize is like, what, whatever. This is child's play. Charlize doesn't change. He's there's also Charlize is we've heard before that he, as an aristocrat, he has familial ties to other countries. He's part German, and the Germans, of course, are invading France. But Charlize is kind of rooting for them to win because, well, I mean, I think he's basically a real contrarian in a way, but also he has these ideas that the Germans are better than the French. So this is a weird situation to be in, and of course he can't keep it to himself. At some point, someone, probably Verderand, calls Charlize a pre-war person, right? And there's something called uh, a view called Charlizeism. Let me see. Let me find this. Um, Okay, one last trait must be mentioned to complete this account of the pro-Germanism of Monsieur de Charlus. He owned it, and though and through a most he owed it, and through a most bizarre reaction to his Charlusism, he found the Germans very ugly, perhaps because they were rather too near to his own blood. It was the Moroccans he was mad about, and even more the Anglo-Saxons, in whom he saw living statues by Phidias. Now, in him, pleasure was not unaccompanied by a certain idea of cruelty, of which I had not at the time learned the full force. The man whom he loved appeared to him in the guise of a delightful torturer. In taking sides against the Germans, he would have seemed to himself to be acting as he did only in his hours of physical pleasure, to be acting, that is, in a manner contrary to his merciful nature, fired with passion for seductive evil, and helping to crush virtuous ugliness. Um, so, uh, this too was his reaction at the time of the murder of Rasputin, an event which, happening as it did at a supper party a la Dostoevsky, and caused a general surprise because people found in it so strong a Russian flavor. So yeah, I mean, of course, the murder of Rasputin was not a historical event. This would have been happening at the same time, right, during World War One. The impression would have been stronger still had not the public been unaware of aspects of the case that were perfectly well known to Monsieur de Charlus, because life disappoints us so often that in the end we come to believe that literature bears no relation to it, and we are therefore astounded when we see the precious ideas that literature has revealed to us display themselves without fear of getting spoiled gratuitously, naturally, in the midst of daily life. When we see, for instance, that a supper party and a murder taking place in Russia actually have something Russian about them. Yes. so, um, so that's Charles. Um, and the narrator sort of doing a little bit of psychoanalysis of him liking the Germans because they're wrong, but in an aesthetic way, and that relates to his sexuality and his sexual masochism, I suppose. Uh, and then a bit about Rasputin's murder being something out of Dostoevsky. Anyway, so after the bit in the hotel, we have another period of years passes, and so it is after the war, and the narrator returns to Paris and is invited to an evening of music, um, and while he is he arrives in the midst of a performance. So while he is well, before he goes in, he's in the courtyard of this house. Whose house is it? Is it the Guermonts again? You know, you'd think I would remember this, but suffice to say, he's invited to another society evening, and he's in the courtyard, and he sort of stumbles a bit over some uneven paving stones, cobblestones, and it reminds him of a time that he stepped over some uneven stones when he was in Venice. Now, I would think that in a time when more things were paved in cobblestones, that this would be a common thing, but it reminded him of this specific incident. It's another of these involuntary memories. It brings him back to being in Venice in a cathedral and looking at the art and how he felt, and this reminds him of other times that he's experienced involuntary memory. The famous one being the Madeleine dipped in lime blossom tea, reminding him of being a child in Cambrai. So he's starting to see that to make these connections and to see how the past can become present in the present. And he's thinking of other things, hearing sounds. The sound of a spoon on a plate reminds him of a hammer on a piece of railway equipment that he heard earlier, and so he's making other connections, and then he's led into this antechamber, which is actually a library, while he's waiting for the current performance of music to be finished. So, you know, if you go to a classical music performance and you arrive late, they won't let you into the concert hall until while a particular piece is being performed. You'll be let in between movements, perhaps, or in between acts. So he's waiting in this antechamber, which is a library, and he's admiring the books and thinking about the books, and thinking about these different memories that these involuntary memories, these other incidents of involuntary memory throughout his life, and is sort of becoming more inspired to actually write the big piece of fiction or the big book that he's always aspired to. He's always wanted to be a writer. He's thinking, I should apply myself to this. And then he goes in to this gathering, and I think some people, it's not a chapter label, because and it's like half of the book is taken up by this last scene, but it's called the bal de tete by some people, which is a head party. So he goes to this head party. It's not really, they don't advertise it, come to our head party, but this is what the scene is called, because apparently there's a thing where in France where people will wear a disguise that's just on their face or something. Anyway, so he goes in and he's like seeing these disguises that these people he knows are wearing, but the disguises are actually just the effects of them getting old. So, you know, it's like this guy is wearing a big white beard that's fake on his face, or you know, these red pouches on on his cheeks. But of course, that's not a disguise. That's what they actually look like. And he's reflecting about how old he's become and how decrepit he has become. Okay, now bear in mind, Proust. This is not funny, but Proust died at 51. So all this stuff is, he's talking about how very old he is, and he's younger than me, and this is even a few years before he's died. So he's in his late 40s and talking about how very old everyone is and how very old he is. He's finding himself, poor guy. but this goes on for pages. Look, by this point, you're used to, you know what Proust thing. He's not gonna tell you one time. He's gonna tell you many times. He's not gonna hint at something. He's gonna tease it out for you. So it's not just one person. It's so many people from the previous volumes are coming up, and he's interacting with them. He's surprised at how old they are, because like 20 years have passed. But it inspires him. Look, I'm running out of time. If I want to be a writer, I have to apply myself. And at this point, he's starting to say, all right, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to write In Search of Lost Time. And at the end, he's describing himself sort of racing against his illness. He doesn't fear death, except for the fact that might stop him from finishing his book. So there you go. So he is now inspired to write In Search of Lost Time. And guess what? Spoiler alert. He did write In Search of Lost Time. So there you go. Now, so what's my overall reaction? I think I share this with a lot of people when I say that Time Regained is the quickest and most exciting read in Search of Lost Time, which is it's a tough sell. It's like, look, you got to slog through 6 books, but it's really good at the end. You could get away with just reading Swan's Way and Guillemot Way in this, but you'd miss you'd miss Sodom and Gomorrah. That's pretty good, and all the craziness of the fugitive. Okay, look, if you're going to read this, you may as well read all of it. But it kind of redeems it. Time Regained. If this wasn't there, if this wasn't a volume in the series, I don't know that would be that as highly regarded, as well remembered. It just sort of, it really does tie a lot of things together. You're reading these things and you're like, oh yes, by this point, yes, I do remember who Verdurin is. There's some of these French people, they come up, they're talked about intensely for like 40 pages, and then you don't hear about them for 600 pages, and then they come back and you're like, who the heck was that guy? Oh, so here's another nice thing about this particular volume, this edition. If you get the Modern Library set of In Search of Lost Time, the last one is not just Time Regained, but it is the Guide to Proust, which is about the last third of this book, and it has an index of characters, an index of historical people, places, and themes. So this is kind of helpful to have throughout reading the whole series, because you can remind yourself. You might want to be careful not to read too far ahead in the index entry for a particular character, because you'll learn plot points. Are there plot points in Search of Lost Time? Proust doesn't really have spoilers, but I mean, I did spoil the fact that a couple of things. There are some things that could be spoiled if you care about that, but you're not reading it for the plot twists, really. Some people say that you do, the plot is the exciting thing about In Search of Lost Time. I didn't find that, but look, I loved reading this. I think if you're Proust curious, you might try just reading Time Regained. Most people just read Swan's Way if they're going to do one, but maybe just do this one. Give it a try. See what it says to you. What kind of a review is that? I don't know. Look, the whole thing, worthwhile. I loved it at times. I hated it at times. I'm glad I've read the whole thing. I can imagine, not soon, but someday in my life, before I die, reading this again. Yes, I would. Anyway, that's what I have to say about Time Regained. It's fantastic. It's got Baron de Charlus getting whipped. It's got uneven paving stones. Everything you want is in here. All right. Thanks for watching.